That night, as I slipped into the simulator using Walsh's credentials, I was startled by movement. Ethan Walsh himself, handsome, popular, one of Thornton's protégés, stepped from the shadows. "Figured I'd find you here," he said, holding up a voice recorder, then switching it off. "Thornton asked me to watch you, but I saw what you did last week. You fixed a stability issue no one else could solve. Then you failed the next level. Didn't make sense. We trained together for hours." As I guided him through a complex maneuver, he admitted what I'd suspected. "Thornton's been altering your scores. I've seen him do it." Then he dropped a real bomb. The F-22 for Friday's demo was marked with my father's call. Signed, Coleman. "Thornton says it's poetic justice," Walsh said, anger flickering in his eyes. "But I think he's afraid." For the first time, I felt hope bloom, cautious and wild. If I could get in that jet, if I could fly, maybe I could set the record straight. The next 48 hours were a blur of secret meetings and training. Alvarez monitored security. Walsh became our man inside Thornton's circle, and Daney prepared. The aircraft, ready to counter any changes Thornton tried to make. Our plan was desperate, but it was all we had. We timed my route to the hangar to the minute. Just enough of a gap in surveillance to make it. Alvarez handed me a forged badge. "This'll get you to level 2. After that, you're on your own." Daney gave me a set of polished pilot's wings, my father's, inscribed with his name and service number. "He earned these," Daney said, emotion roughening his voice. "He'd want you to have them now. The day of the demonstration. Dawn clear and perfect." Thornton flew the Coleman with showy precision. I watched, heart pounding, as he executed every maneuver, his face the mask of a man who believed the world belonged to him. At the critical moment, during the centerpiece inverted descent, Walsh's voice came over the comm. "Maintenance. Alert triggered. 2 minutes, Sparrow." My forged badge got me past the first checkpoint. My technical jargon got me past a suspicious guard at the second. I reached the Raptor's cockpit with seconds to spare. The controls felt familiar. Like home. "Tower, this is FX-93, Sparrow. Authorization code, Coleman 73 Nair. Security protocol override. Static. Suspicion." Then a burst of interference from Daney, buying me the precious seconds I needed. "FX-93, cleared for emergency takeoff." I engaged the throttle, the jet roaring down the runway, power surging through my veins. Above, Thornton's Coleman started to spin, his custom settings failing him at the worst possible moment. Over the radio, I transmitted the exact sequence needed to recover. "Coleman, reduce throttle. Ease your stick." He hesitated, pride. Fighting survival, but finally obeyed. His jet stabilized, but by then, I was in the sky beside him, canopies almost touching. Our eyes met recognition, disbelief, rage. I tapped my father's wings, letting him see what he could never take from me. Then I broke formation, rolling into a flawless recovery maneuver, the Raptor an extension of my body and will. "Tower, this is Emily Harper. Requesting permission to complete the demo. Dedicate to John Coleman Harper." Silence. Then a voice. "General Michaels, the Pentagon's oversight officer." "Granted, Sparrow. Show us what you've got." For 10 minutes, I flew like I'd been born for it. Every maneuver a blend of skill and soul, every turn a tribute. Below, the assembled brass and cadets watched in awed silence. Thornton, beaten and humiliated, landed without further incident. My flight, however, was the talk of the base. When I touched down, I felt years of shame and sorrow lift. In the hours that followed, the truth emerged. Daney's footage exposed Thornton's tampering. Walsh and Alvarez testified to the sabotage and the culture of bias that had tainted the program. Thornton was dishonorably discharged. My dismissal was reversed. In a small velvet box, General Michaels gave me my father's posthumous service. "Medal. These wings weren't clipped by failure," he said, "but by silence. You made them fly again." 6 months later, I earned my commission. The Academy changed its policies, ensuring no one else could be silenced because of their background. As I took the Coleman into the sky on graduation day, the sun rose gold and pink over the runway. My father's voice was in my head, proud and loving. "Feel the aircraft, Sparrow. Don't just fly it, become it." My wheels touched down. My place in the world finally earned, not given. Because in the end, the sky belongs to those who refuse to let anyone clip their wings. They called my name over the loudspeaker, the kind of cold, clipped announcement that made every head on the sun-bleached tarmac snap toward me. For a second, I was just a name echoing across the wide-open air of the Academy. Then I became the girl standing alone. I, Emily Harper, was handed a sealed envelope by a junior officer with the bored efficiency of a postal worker. No explanation, no ceremony, just institutional precision, sharp as a blade. The line of cadets at attention fractured as I was ordered to step forward, my boots loud on the concrete, the entire unit's gaze searing into my back. Some looked away, already distancing themselves from the spectacle of failure. Others watched with thinly veiled anticipation, the way kids do when they sense blood in the water. A single derisive laugh cracked the silence from somewhere near the back. Someone else, braver or crueler, muttered loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Guess the farmer's daughter couldn't keep up after all." The words were meant to sting, but I'd heard worse. Growing up in a town where everyone knew your family business, and your last name meant more than your first. I kept my mouth shut. I just walked away, my short-cropped blonde hair ruffling in the breeze as I forced myself not to look back, not to betray the surge of heat climbing my neck, not to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break. The other cadets resumed their drills. I stood apart, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement, every glance. At 28, I was older than most recruits. My sharp green eyes had always missed nothing, an asset in the cockpit, a curse on the ground. I was quiet, focused, a little strange to those who grew up in military families with medals on the mantle and stories of war as their lullabies. I was an outsider from the beginning. My quiet made me an easy target. My age made me a curiosity. My rural roots made me disposable. The wind carried fragments of laughter from a knot of younger cadet sons and daughters of officers, kids who sailed through evaluations with scores that always seemed a little too perfect. They wore their confidence like an extra piece of uniform, never wondering if they belonged, never wondering if the system would turn on them. I watched them for a long moment, then turned away, standing alone on the vast, empty tarmac as the sky turned gold above the hangars and the sun slipped behind a horizon lined with fuel trucks and grounded jets. Captain Bradley Thornton was the last man I wanted to see just then. He strode toward me with his usual practiced stride, features chiseled into an expression of regret so polished it almost sparkled. His icy blue eyes, however, gave nothing away except maybe a flicker of satisfaction at a job completed. "We've reviewed your performance matrix," he said, his voice so coldly professional it could have been a recording. "It doesn't meet the criteria for tactical decisions under high-stress response." His tone was reasonable, his words clinically detached, but there was something about the way his lips barely twitched at the corners that told me he was enjoying this, just a little. He handed me the envelope, and the dismissal became real. The sun was setting, the hangars bathed in orange light. I reached inside my jacket, my hand closing around a tarnished silver wingpin. My father's, the only thing I had left after the crash that took his life 3 years earlier. I ran my thumb over the faded edge where his name had once been etched, the groove smoothed by years of anxious handling. John Coleman Harper hadn't been just another crop duster in Kansas. He was a legend in our county, a pilot whose instinct for engines and wind made him the man even commercial flyers came to for advice. Local pilots would divert their routes just to have him check their engines, trusting his hands more than the manufacturer's manuals. He used to say, "You've got the touch, Sparrow." The first time I took the controls at 12, he looked at me like I was magic. "It's in your blood, Emily. The sky's where you belong." That memory both comforted and stung. I'd promised him I'd fly, really fly, not just dust fields and dodge crop rows. Now that promise lay shattered at my feet, another casualty of a system that valued pedigree over talent, conformity over intuition. So lost in the pain of it all, I didn't notice the approach of Tech Sergeant Danny Brooks until his gravelly voice broke the spell. "Rough day, kid?" he asked, wiping a greasy hand on his coveralls. He was 40, weathered, with grease stains on his forearms and a kind of steady kindness in his eyes that came from fixing things for longer than I'd been alive. His hands were battered from decades of wrenching on military and civilian planes. Unlike the officers and most of the instructors, Danny had always treated me with a kind of gruff respect, never talking down to me, always seeing me as a fellow mechanic first and a failed cadet second. I'd spent more hours in the maintenance hangar than most recruits, my mechanical aptitude earning me a small measure of belonging from the veterans, if not the brass. "Just got my walking papers," I said, my voice steady from long practice. Apparently, my tactical response profile doesn't meet standards. The bitterness in my words tasted like old pennies, but I forced myself to keep my chin up. Danny's face darkened. "Thornton's work, I'm guessing?" he said, glancing at the envelope. "The same way your gyro stabilizer mysteriously recalibrated itself mid-simulation yesterday?" The words hit me like a cold slab. For weeks, my simulations and maintenance tests had gone perfectly during drills, but then something would fail during the evaluations. Calibration drift, sensor anomalies, software patches, always something that undermined me at exactly the wrong moment. "Doesn't matter now," I said, already feeling the crushing inevitability of it all. "I've got 48 hours to clear out." Danny stepped into my path, his posture suddenly urgent. "You're just gonna walk away? Let Thornton win?" My jaw tightened. "I fought every day I was here, Sergeant." "They made their decision." Danny glanced around, ensuring no one was in earshot, then leaned closer. "What if I told you there might be a way to show them exactly what they're throwing away?" There was something in his voice, a conspiratorial edge that felt dangerous, but thrilling. "I'm listening," I said. Danny jerked his head toward the hangar. "Walk with me." We moved quickly, our boots echoing off the concrete as the sun dipped below the edge of the flight line. 3 days from now," he said in a low voice, "there's a demonstration for some big brass from Washington, a showcase of the program's best pilots. Thornton's the star attraction. Naturally, you'll be flying the new F-22 they brought in for testing." My pulse quickened. The Raptor was the crown jewel of the Air Force state-of-the-art, a marvel of engineering and lethality. Only the top instructors ever got to touch. "Its controls. What's that got to do with me?" I asked, trying to sound skeptical, but a wild idea had already taken root. Danny grinned, eyes glinting. "I've watched you, Harper. You've got skills these Silver Spoon kids couldn't match in a decade. It's in your hands, the way you feel the machine, the way you fix things nobody else can. Your father and I served together before that incident that grounded him. I was there when they called it pilot error. Thornton falsified that report." My breath caught. I looked down at the old wingpin, my father's call sign almost invisible now. "You've got 3 days, Emily," Danny said quietly. 3 days to show them what you can do. I know how you can do it, but it's risky. Career ending for me. Maybe worse for you. That night, The simulator hummed beneath my fingers, the darkness of the hangar punctuated by the blue glow of the screens. Danny kept watch at the door while I climbed into the pilot's seat, heart pounding. Every system was more advanced, more precise than anything I'd officially trained on at the academy. As the screens came to life, I closed my eyes and let myself drift back to those Kansas fields, the horizon golden with wheat, the rickety old biplane that was my first classroom. My father's voice echoed in my head. Feel the aircraft, Sparrow. Don't just fly it. Become it. The Advanced Combat Simulation was a trial by fire, a module reserved for senior cadets. My first runs were rough, the F-22's controls, so sensitive that the smallest error sent me crashing into digital oblivion. But the longer I flew, the more natural it became. By my fourth attempt, my hands knew the controls better than my mind. By my sixth, I was surpassing the programs. Benchmarks flying by instinct, not by the book. The things the instructors called unorthodox were actually the mark of a pilot who understood what flight felt like, not just how it looked in manuals. When the virtual F-22 suffered a catastrophic failure, I recovered the aircraft on muscle memory, years of barnstorming over Kansas asserting themselves. I ran scenario after scenario until the simulated dawn bled through the hangar's windows. Danny returned, grinning. You've got the touch, just like your old man. For a second, the years fell away. I was a 12-year-old in the cockpit of a patched-up biplane, the world stretching wide and limitless. But reality has a way of crashing into even the most carefully constructed moments of hope. And in that tense midnight hush, the illusion of safety was shattered by a simple, insistent flash of a red security light in the far corner of the hangar, blinking with the cold precision of all things mechanical and unsentimental. In the enveloping blue glow of the simulator's displays, the intrusion was almost surreal, a distant warning that cut through the fog of adrenaline and focus. I stared at the crimson pulse, feeling its rhythm thump in my veins, as if it were echoing the rapid beat of my own heart. For an instant, denial set in. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe it was a routine diagnostic, a false alarm, some technical quirk in a building full of technical quirks. But deep down, we both knew. We had left the simulator running. Every movement I'd made on those flight controls, every keystroke and button press, every second spent violating protocol, all of it was being meticulously logged by the facility's security system. Cameras positioned with military efficiency had watched my hands dance across the instrument panels, capturing everything with the unsparing, dispassionate memory of digital surveillance. The realization settled over me with a sickening weight, turning the rush of achievement into a cold dread that spread from my chest to the pit of my stomach. All that I had gained in those fleeting hours, the rediscovery of confidence, the proof that I could fly better than anyone had ever allowed me to demonstrate, now risked being nullified, overshadowed, obliterated by the hard evidence of my disobedience. Danny, standing guard by the hangar door, noticed it at the same time I did. His face, lined with 1,000 unspoken stories and shaded by the years spent in service to both the Air Force and to truth, tightened into a mask of hard calculation. Someone's gonna see that, he muttered, voice gravelly but laced with a forced calm, as if by speaking the possibility out loud he could somehow get ahead of it, wrestle the future into something less threatening. He didn't look at me, but I could see the gears turning behind his eyes, the old mechanic's mind already cycling through contingency plans, escape routes, damage control. For Danny, every disaster had a protocol. Every screw-up, mechanical or human, was just another problem to be solved with enough ingenuity, grit, or luck. But this wasn't a mechanical issue. It was a breach, and not a small one. Breaking into a restricted flight simulator, running classified software, leaving an unmistakable trail in the system's digital logs, These were violations that could end careers, not just for me, but for anyone seen as complicit. In that moment, the weight of what we'd done, what I had risked, pressed down on both of us. There was no more margin for error, no more time for gradual steps or tentative hope. The countdown had begun, and the next 72 hours would decide everything. Danny's eyes flashed to the light, then back to me. Even in the shadowy gloom, I could see the battle between caution and resolve playing out on his features. "Now, we accelerate the plan," he said, and in his voice there was a kind of grim acceptance, a recognition that all those careful what-ifs and maybes were no longer luxuries we could afford. It wasn't just about vindicating my skills anymore or salvaging my reputation. It was about survival, his mine, maybe even the future of the program if our suspicions about the rigged evaluations went public. "You've got 72 hours, Emily," he said, his tone shifting from the quiet mentor of earlier to the hard-edged strategist of old war stories. "Someone saw you fly. The question is who? And what will they do about it?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the stale scent of machine oil and old jet fuel that permeated the maintenance hangar. It wasn't rhetorical. In the May Air Force, every system was designed to be fail-safe, every action logged, every anomaly flagged. Even on a quiet night, the security team monitored their screens in endless rotation, cross-referencing personnel schedules and digital footprints, trained to notice anything out of the ordinary. My unsanctioned session would have triggered a cascade of alerts, an unauthorized login, restricted software accessed outside of scheduled hours, hardware activated when it should have been dark and silent. The camera feeds would show my face, my hands on the controls, the undeniable evidence of intent and capability. Someone would review those logs, and when they did, they would see the truth, that I didn't just slip up. I broke the rules in the most spectacularly public way possible. But the other question, the one Danny voiced with the wary reverence of a man who'd seen the best and worst of human nature, was far more urgent. Who would find out first? Would it be some nameless base security tech dutifully ticking boxes on their nightly checklist? A mid-level officer, eager to catch infractions and climb the bureaucratic ladder? Or, worst of all, Captain Thornton himself, the very man who had orchestrated so many of the obstacles that now threatened to end my career before it had even truly begun. Each possible watcher carried their own risks, their own consequences. Some would see only the breach, the rule broken, the protocol ignored. But others, those with a stake in keeping the status quo, or in covering their own tracks, might see something else entirely. A threat, an opportunity, or a problem to be buried before it can embarrass the institution. For a few seconds, I simply stood there, caught between the fading adrenaline of flight and the icy flood of dread. My breath sounded harsh in my own ears, and I realized my hands were trembling, not from fear of flying, but from fear of falling, of everything coming undone just when it had started to feel possible. The world outside the hangar seemed impossibly far away. The ordinary sounds of the base-distant engines, the far-off rumble of jets on the runway, the muted laughter of off-duty personnel suddenly irrelevant, part of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Danny moved quickly now, gathering up tools, wiping down surfaces, doing everything he could to erase our presence, to reduce the session to nothing more than a blip on a security report. But even he couldn't wipe away the digital evidence. The cameras had already seen what they needed to see. The logs had already been written. "We'll need to get ahead of this," he said, more to himself than to me. "If they come asking questions, if anyone starts poking around." He trailed off, and I heard the rest of the sentence in my head. "If they want a scapegoat, if they need to make an example, it'll be you." In that moment, the reality of what we were up against settled on me with an almost physical force. This wasn't just about being caught. It was about being trapped in a system that cared more about procedure than about truth, about protecting reputations than recognizing skill. My crime was not just breaking the rules, but exposing the flaws in the system itself. And the system, as Danny had warned, had a way of protecting itself at any cost. The next 72 hours became the new timeline, the boundary between everything that had been and everything that could still be. It was a window of opportunity, narrow, precarious, and closing fast. Danny's words, stripped of comfort but bracing in their urgency, became my anchor. Someone saw you fly. The question is who? And what will they do about it? It wasn't just about consequences anymore. It was about possibility. Someone had seen what I could do, and now, for the first time, I had the chance to force the truth into the open, to demand that the evidence of my ability be acknowledged, even if it meant exposing every dark corner of the Academy's hidden biases. As we slipped from the hangar into the cold night air, every step felt heavier, more deliberate. The base was quiet, but I felt watched, not just by the eyes of security, but by the unseen gaze of the institution itself, hungry for order and quick to stamp out anything that threatened its illusion of fairness. The moon was high above the flight line, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Somewhere out there, the person who would decide my fate was already stirring, reading logs, reviewing footage, maybe even preparing a disciplinary report. But somewhere, too, there was the possibility of justice, the chance that my unauthorized flight would become the crack in the wall, the flaw that let the truth leak through. Back in my dorm room, sleep was impossible. Every sound outside my window set my nerves jangling. A distant door closing, a truck rumbling past, footsteps echoing down the corridor. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Would they confront me in the morning, a stern officer with a file of evidence and a clipboard full of procedures? Would Danny be called in first, pressured to confess, to save himself by naming me as the instigator? Or would it all happen quietly, an email in my inbox, a summons to the commandant's office, a form letter that ended my dreams with bureaucratic efficiency? But as the hours crawled by, fear gave way to determination. If this was the end, it would not be a quiet one. If I was to be brought down, it would not be because I failed, but because I dared. I thought of my father's pin, still hidden inside. My jacket, the last relic of the man who had taught me to believe that flying was more than a skill, it was an act of faith. I thought of Danny, risking everything for a second chance at the justice that had been denied him so many years before. And I thought of all the others, the cadets whose names I didn't even know, who had been failed by a system that was too proud to admit its mistakes. 72 hours. That was all the time I had left. Time to prepare, to plan, to find the person who had seen the footage, and, if I was lucky, to turn that discovery to my advantage before it destroyed me. The red light in the hangar was more than a warning. It was a countdown. The game was on, and the rules no longer mattered. Only the truth did. So as dawn broke over the base, painting the runways in cold gold and orange, I gathered my things with a new sense of purpose. The day ahead was uncertain, the risks enormous, but I was ready, at last, to stop hiding and start fighting. If someone had seen me fly, then someone had seen what I was truly capable of. And if the question was what they would do about it, then I would make sure the answer would not be silence. Not this time, not ever again. The next morning, an urgent knock at my dormitory door jolted me from restless sleep. Lieutenant Mia Alvarez, head of security operations, stood in the hallway 30, tough, one of the only female instructors, and the kind of woman everyone respected and no one crossed lightly. "Get dressed and meet me at Hangar 6, she ordered. "Don't talk to anyone." I dressed in a blur, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Would I be escorted out immediately, or would there be formal charges? Would Danny be blamed? The thought of dragging the old mechanic down with me made my stomach twist. I crossed the base, avoiding the stares of other cadets. Word of my dismissal had already spread. Gossip traveled faster than jet fuel. When I reached the hangar, Alvarez stood beside the simulator, her arms folded. She told me to close the door. When I did, she disabled the security cameras with a few keystrokes, then turned to me. We have 7 minutes. Explain why you were using the restricted simulator after hours, and why your metrics broke 3 academy records. I blinked, stunned by the directness. She had seen the footage. She had seen what I could do. There was no point lying, not now. I told her everything. The sabotage, the mysterious failures. The reason I had to prove I deserved my place, not for the program, but for myself and my father's name. I risked everything, implicating Danny in the process, but Alvarez only nodded. That's a serious accusation. You know what this is? Schedule for? I did the Pentagon demonstration. Thornton's moment. What if, she said slowly, instead of leading quietly, you showed them what kind of talent Thornton is pushing out the door? She reactivated the cameras, voice hard again. You're restricted to base until your discharge is finalized. Comply with all protocols. Then, quietly, Walsh uses access code 472mm for his sessions. He's forgetful. Good luck. With that, she left.